The trail wound upward through the cool morning mist, and the young naturalist paused to catch his breath against the thin mountain air. Pines and firs crowded the slope, their needles heavy with dew. He had traveled far to reach these remote forests, and now each step brought him closer to the place the maps had only hinted at. A faint rustle moved through the branches overhead. He looked up and stopped short. What he had taken for leaves at first glance resolved into something else entirely. Thousands of monarchs clung to the trunks and limbs, their wings folded tight like orange and black shingles on a roof. The clusters hung low enough to touch, blotting out the green beneath. He took another careful step forward. The butterflies did not scatter. They remained still, only the occasional wing flexing open to reveal the bright veins beneath. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in narrow beams, catching on the edges of the mass and turning it into a living tapestry of color. The air smelled of resin and damp earth, and beneath that a faint sweetness he could not name. He set his pack down quietly. The sight held him in place longer than he expected. He had read of these gatherings, yet the scale surprised him. Entire trees seemed to breathe with the slow pulse of so many wings at rest. A single butterfly detached from the cluster and drifted downward, landing on a fern near his boot. Its antennae twitched once, twice, then stilled. The naturalist lowered himself to one knee, careful not to disturb the ground. Around him the forest remained hushed, except for the distant call of a bird and the soft, almost inaudible shift of wings adjusting their grip. He felt the weight of the journey settle into something quieter, something closer to awe. The monarchs had found their winter haven, and now he had found them. The naturalist rose slowly from his knee, his eyes still fixed on the cluster of orange and black that clung to the fir boughs like living leaves. A faint shift ran through the mass, and then another, until the first monarch lifted free and tested the air with slow, deliberate strokes. He followed. The journey north began without fanfare. The butterflies funneled out of the mountains in loose rivers, riding the warming updrafts that carried them over dry plateaus and into open country. The naturalist kept pace on foot and by borrowed rides, watching how the insects met each change in the wind. When gusts pressed them sideways, they tilted their wings and slid along the current rather than fighting it. Rain came in sudden sheets. They tucked themselves beneath broad leaves until the sky cleared, then rose again as if nothing had interrupted them. Fields of milkweed appeared, and the monarchs dropped low to feed. He knelt among the plants and noted the precise way each butterfly unrolled its proboscis, the quick, rhythmic pumping that restored strength for the next stretch. Cities rose on the horizon, their glass towers catching the light. The insects threaded between buildings and over highways, never pausing long enough for traffic or noise to turn them aside. He tracked them through parks and along river corridors, amazed at how the same fragile wings that had survived a mountain winter now crossed human landscapes without hesitation. One afternoon, a hard crosswind met them above a wide river valley. The monarchs climbed higher, riding the air until the gusts lost their force, then descended in a long, gliding slant toward the far bank. The naturalist stood on the near shore and felt the same wind push against his coat. He waited until the last visible speck had vanished into the haze, then turned north once more. By evening, the group had settled into a stand of tall grass beside a quiet road. The naturalist sat a short distance away, listening to the soft, settling sounds of wings folding for the night. The day's miles lay behind them, and the breeding ground still lay ahead. The naturalist remained seated long after the others had quieted, the tall grass whispering against his knees in the cooling air. Ahead lay the final stretches of open country, and he could already sense the shift in the light and the scent of the land opening into wider meadows. The monarchs rested now, wings tucked tight, yet their presence filled the space between each blade of grass like a held breath. Morning came with a low sun and steady wings lifting one by one. The group rose in loose formation and followed the same northward line they had held for weeks. Fields gave way to scattered farms, then to stretches of wildflowers that grew thicker along the verges. By midday, the butterflies had spread across a broad slope of clover and milkweed, their orange and black flashing against the green. The naturalist walked among them without hurry, watching new arrivals settle and older ones lift again in short, testing flights. He paused at the crest of the rise and looked out across the summer grounds. Here the cycle completed itself once more. The butterflies that had left the Mexican mountains months earlier were gone, their long flight finished. In their place moved the next generation, hatched along the way and guided only by an instinct older than any map. They would feed, mate, and lay eggs that would carry the line farther north before the whole pattern turned south again in the fall. Each stage depended on the one before it, a chain of fragile timing stretched across thousands of miles. A single monarch landed on a milkweed leaf near his boot, wings opening and closing in slow rhythm. The naturalist noted the worn edges and the faint dust of scales that lifted when the insect shifted. These meadows had fed the same species for generations, yet the patches of milkweed grew smaller each year, cut by roads and plowed under for crops. The winds that once carried the insects north now sometimes arrived too early or too late, and the flowers they needed bloomed on their own altered schedule. He had followed the painted wings across 2 countries and still could not say how many more seasons the route would hold. The butterflies continued to arrive through the afternoon, dropping into the grass like bright leaves. The naturalist stayed until the light began to slant and the first cool breeze moved through the meadow. Then he turned back toward the road, the day's quiet observations settling inside him like the monarchs settling for the night.